3 months later, Commander Yuki stood before the assembled high command of the Trilaxian Empire in the great crystal chamber that had witnessed 1,000 victory celebrations. His report lay before them, translated into the formal ceremonial, language reserved for the most important military communications. But no amount of formal language could adequately convey what he had witnessed on Earth. The silence in the chamber stretched like a taut wire as the 12 members of the High Command absorbed the impossible details of his encounter. Supreme Commander Vax finally spoke his ancient voice, crackling with disbelief and growing anger. "You expect us to believe," Vax said, "that a species of primitive mammals somehow took control of our most advanced warships without our sensors detecting any kind of attack?" "Yes, Supreme Commander," Yuki replied steadily. "You claim these creatures learned our sacred language in less than 3 years, when our own linguists require decades of study." "Yes, Supreme Commander. You tell us they infiltrated our most secure computer systems and accessed classified information that should be impossible for outsiders to obtain." "Yes, Supreme Commander." The old leader rose from his throne, his crystalline exoskeleton creaking with age and rage. "This is either the most elaborate lie ever told to this council, or you have suffered some kind of mental breakdown during your mission." "With respect," Supreme Commander Yuki said, "I have physical evidence." The viewing chamber filled with holographic displays showing human technology that defied every known law of physics engines, that folded space computers that used consciousness as processing power weapons that could selectively disable threats without causing collateral damage. The assembled commanders stared in stunned silence as the implications became clear. "These designs are impossible," High Commander Zara whispered. "That is what I thought as well," Yuki replied, "until I saw them working. But if humans possess such advanced technology," War Commander Kex said, "why did they not simply destroy your fleet?" "Because they do not think like us," Yuki explained. "They do not see conflict as the natural state of the universe. They see it as a problem to be solved." The High Command erupted in arguments. Some demanded immediate mobilization of the entire Imperial fleet. Others insisted the whole report was an elaborate deception. A few suggested that humanity represented a threat so dangerous that their entire solar system should be sterilized from a safe distance. But Supreme Commander Vax raised his hand for silence and asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. "What do you recommend?" Commander Yuki. Yuki had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. He had reviewed every detail of his encounter with the humans. He had spoken with the Trilaxian refugees, who had chosen to return with him as ambassadors. He had studied the advanced technologies that Dohyun had freely shared as gifts of friendship. "I recommend we accept their offer of partnership," he said. The chamber exploded in outraged voices. Calls of cowardice and treason filled the air. Several commanders demanded that Yuki be arrested for suggesting surrender to an inferior species. But Yuki stood calmly in the center of the storm and waited for the fury to subside. When quiet finally returned, Supreme Commander Vax leaned forward on his throne. "You would have us abandon 10,000 years of imperial tradition. You would have us give up everything we have built, everything we have conquered. I would have us become something greater than conquerors," Yuki replied. "I would have us become explorers, teachers, partners in building a better galaxy. And what of our enemies? What of the species that resist our rule? What of those who would see our empire fall? They would become our friends instead of our enemies. They would join us instead of fighting us. They would help us grow instead of forcing us to waste resources on endless wars." Several months later, the first joint human Trilaxian expedition departed Earth, carrying representatives from both species, along with refugees from dozens of conquered worlds. Their mission was not conquest, but contact Not domination, but communication. Not the expansion of empire, but the sharing of knowledge. Commander Yuki stood on the bridge of the hybrid vessel, watching stars wheel past in patterns that no traditional Trilaxian ship could have. Navigated. Beside him, human scientist Suman worked alongside Trilaxian engineer Kara, solving propulsion problems that neither species could have tackled alone. In the months since first contact, the changes had been remarkable. Trilaxian scientists, working with human researchers, had made breakthroughs that advanced both civilizations by centuries. Trilaxian artists exposed to human creativity had produced works of beauty that neither species could have imagined alone. Trilaxian children learning. Alongside human youngsters were developing ways of thinking that promised to revolutionize both cultures. Not everyone in the Empire had accepted the new path. There were still those who believed in the old ways of conquest and domination. Some sectors had declared independence rather than accept partnership with former enemies. Several military commanders had taken their fleets and disappeared into unexplored regions of space. But change had begun, and it was spreading like ripples across still water. Each world that chose cooperation over conquest became an example for others. Each success of the partnership model made the old ways seem more outdated and destructive. As Yuki watched the stars, he remembered Do-hyan's final words to him back on Earth. The human had said that his people had been waiting to meet the Trilaxians, but now Yuki understood that it was not really about waiting. It was about becoming ready. Humanity had not been waiting for the Trilaxians to arrive. They had been preparing themselves to be worthy of friendship with any species they might encounter. They had been learning to see differences as strengths rather than threats. They had been practicing the art of building bridges instead of walls, and now finally the Trilaxian Empire was beginning to learn the same lessons. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders that no single species could explore alone. But together, working as partners instead of enemies, they might someday touch the infinite. In his private log that night, Yuki wrote a simple entry: "Today, we took our first steps toward becoming the people we were always meant to be. Tomorrow, we will take the next ones." Impossible! Yuki roared, his voice echoing through the bridge as his mandibles chattered with rage and terror. "Our computer systems are protected by quantum encryption across 17 different dimensional matrices. No biological mind in the galaxy could possibly understand our technology, let alone take control of it." Do-hyan's response came with what Yuki was beginning to recognize as typical human calmness. "You are absolutely correct, Commander. No single biological mind could accomplish what you have witnessed today. That is precisely why I am not working alone." The main viewing screen changed again, and this time, it showed something that made Yuki step backward in shock. Instead of the primitive cities his scout reports had described, the planet Earth now glowed with networks of light that pulsed like a living heartbeat. Massive structures that definitely had not existed during the reconnaissance missions now covered every continent. These buildings were clearly advanced technology, but their design was unlike anything in Trilaxian databases. "Meet," Sumin Do-hyan said, and suddenly a new voice joined the conversation. This voice was clearly female, but spoke Trilaxian with the same impossible perfection that Do-hyan demonstrated. "Hello," Commander Suman said pleasantly, as if she were greeting a neighbor. "I have been studying your propulsion systems for the past several months. Very impressive engineering, though. I believe we can improve the quantum efficiency by approximately 40%. Before Yuki could respond, another voice spoke up. "This is Kyung-soo," the male voice said cheerfully. "I have been analyzing your weapon systems. The plasma containment fields show elegant mathematical principles, but you are losing significant energy through quantum dimensional bleed-off." Then another human joined the conversation. "Ji-won, here came a young-sounding female voice. Your medical technology demonstrates remarkable advances, Commander. However, I notice your scientists have not. yet solved the cellular degradation problems that occur in zero-gravity environments. Soon dozens of human voices filled the communication channels of Yuki's flagship. Each person discussed different aspects of Trilaxian technology with casual expertise that had taken his people many centuries to develop. But what disturbed Yuki more than their knowledge was their attitude. They did not sound boastful or threatening. Instead, they seemed genuinely fascinated, like students who had discovered an interesting new subject to explore. You see, Commander Do-hyun explained while the other human voices continued their technical discussions. While your scout ships were observing our planet, we were observing them in return. Every scan they performed taught us about your technology. Every transmission they sent showed us your language and cultural patterns. Every stealth protocol they used revealed your tactical thinking and strategic planning. Yuki felt his four hearts hammering against his chest plate, hard enough to crack his exoskeleton. But learning to operate our technology and actually understanding the scientific principles behind it are completely different challenges. He protested. That is very true. Do-hyun agreed readily. Understanding the deeper principles required much more time and effort. Approximately 18 months, once we had gathered sufficient data to work with. The truly challenging part was not figuring out how your various systems functioned. The real difficulty was accomplishing this research without alerting you to our presence inside your computer networks. The implications of this statement hit Yuki like a meteor impact. These humans had not simply hacked into his ships during the last few minutes of conversation. They had been invisibly infiltrating Trilaxian computer systems for over a year, learning everything about his people while remaining completely undetected by the most advanced security protocols in the galaxy. During this time, Suman added helpfully, we also learned about Trilaxian history, culture, art, music, literature, philosophy, and social structures. Your civilization has achieved remarkable things over the past 10,000 years. Kyungsu joined in. Your mathematical frameworks are particularly elegant, especially the 17-dimensional calculus you use for hyperspace navigation. We found your approach to quantum consciousness theory quite inspiring. Jiwon contributed. Your medical advances in cellular regeneration and life extension are truly impressive. Though we did notice some interesting gaps in your research that we might be able to help fill. More human voices continued adding comments about different aspects of Trilaxian civilization. Each comment demonstrated not just technical knowledge but deep understanding of subjects that even educated Trilaxians found difficult. The humans discussed advanced physics as easily as they might talk about weather. They analyzed complex engineering problems as if they were simple puzzles. They referenced obscure historical events and cultural traditions that most Trilaxians had forgotten. Yuki realized with growing amazement that these humans had not only learned his people's technology in less than 2 years, they had also absorbed thousands of years of Trilaxian civilization, including arts, sciences, philosophy, and culture, that took his own people decades of study to master. But why, Yuki asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Why reveal yourselves now? You could have destroyed my entire fleet without any warning whatsoever. You could have eliminated us before we even knew you existed, because destruction is not our objective. Do-hyun replied gently, let me tell you something important about human nature. Commander, we are curious beings by fundamental design. When we encounter something we do not understand, our first instinct is not to fear it or attempt to destroy it. Our natural response is to learn from it. The viewing screen shifted to show what appeared to be massive construction projects across Earth's surface, but as Yuki examined the images more carefully, he realized these were not military installations or weapons facilities. Instead, they looked like schools, laboratories, research centers, and what could only be described as cultural exchange facilities. When we first discovered that your people existed, Do-hyun continued, our immediate reaction was not to prepare for war. Instead, we began preparing for communication. We constructed translation. Systems studied your cultural patterns, learned your historical background. We wanted to understand who you really are as a species. Suman rejoined the conversation. Your people have accomplished truly remarkable achievements. Commander, faster than light travel matter to energy conversion, quantum consciousness, transfer technology. These represent thousands of years of scientific advancement and creative thinking. But Kyung-Soo added, we noticed something very interesting about Trilaxian technology and scientific development. Everything is built upon the same fundamental assumptions, the same mathematical frameworks, the same physical principles, the same approaches to problem solving. Ji-won continued this thought. What your species has created is undeniably beautiful and highly functional, but it is also somewhat limited in scope. You have reached a developmental plateau because your entire civilization thinks about problems. In essentially the same way, Do-Yun took over the explanation. Once again, humans approach challenges from angles that your people have never considered, Commander. And when we combine human creative intuition with Trilaxian technical precision and cultural wisdom, the viewing screen now showed new designs that merged human creativity with alien engineering, producing hybrid technologies that seemed almost magical. We can create things that neither of our species could possibly achieve. Working alone, Yuki stared at the impossible machines displayed before. His eyes engines that could fold space itself, instead of merely traveling through existing hyperspace corridors, computers that used quantum consciousness as processing power rather than simple calculation. Weapons that could selectively disable specific threats without causing any harm to nearby innocent beings. You are not simply more technologically advanced than we expected, Yuki said with growing wonder and respect. You are evolutionarily different as a species. Your minds work in ways that ours simply cannot replicate. Everyone thinks differently, Do-Hyun said with gentle wisdom. That is exactly what makes meeting new species so tremendously valuable. You came to our world planning to conquer us, Commander. But what if instead of conquest we chose to learn from each other? As Yuki prepared to make the most important decision of his life, he realized that everything he had believed about strength and weakness had been turned upside down. The humans had demonstrated power beyond anything in Trilaxian experience, but they had done so without violence, without cruelty, without the dominance displays that his species considered natural. Do-Hyun Yuki called out over the communication channel. I have one more question before I must decide what to do. Of course, Commander. Ask whatever you need to know. My people will demand to know what manner of beings you truly are, Yuki said carefully. Are you gods who have taken physical form? Are you ancient machines pretending to be biological creatures? Are you something else, entirely beyond our understanding? The response came not just from Do-Hyun, but from dozens of human voices speaking together in perfect harmony, creating a sound more beautiful than any Trilaxian music Yuki had ever heard. The combined voices seemed to resonate with frequencies that touched something deep in his soul. We are teachers who love to learn. The voices said, we are students who love to teach. We are builders who construct bridges instead of walls. We are dreamers who turn impossibilities into realities. We are humans. Commander Yuki, and we have been waiting so very long to meet you and your people. The words hung in the air like a benediction, and Yuki felt something fundamental shift inside his consciousness. For his entire life, he had been taught that strength came from the ability to dominate others, that success meant conquering those who were different, that the natural order of the universe required the strong to rule over the weak, but these humans had shown him a different kind of strength. The power to create instead of destroy, to unite instead of divide, to build up instead of tear down. They had taken control of his entire fleet without firing a single shot, not through superior weapons but through superior understanding. His fleet prepared to depart. Earth Earth, Yuki looked back at the blue planet that had changed everything he thought he knew about the universe. The humans had not conquered his ships or his people in any traditional sense. Instead, they had done something far more profound and terrifying. They had conquered his imagination. In the report he would write for the Trilaxian High Command, Yuki would struggle to find adequate words for what he had experienced. How could he explain to his superiors that they had encountered a species that wielded knowledge like a weapon, kindness like armor, and curiosity like an unstoppable force of nature? How could he make the imperial leadership understand that humanity's greatest strength was not their advanced technology or their superior intelligence, but their fundamental refusal to see other beings as enemies to be destroyed rather than friends waiting to be discovered? The humans had many names for themselves, but as Yuki's fleet engaged their hyperspace engines, he realized what they truly represented. They were gardeners working patiently in a universe full of warriors. They were cultivating wisdom and understanding where others planted only fear and hatred. And perhaps most importantly, they were living, proof that his people could choose a different path. The final transmission from Earth followed them into hyperspace, carrying a message that would echo in Yuki's mind for the rest of his life. Safe travels. Commander Do-hyun said, "We will be here whenever. Your people are ready to learn and grow together." Over the following hours, Do-hyun and his fellow humans guided Yuki through a tour of human civilization that challenged everything the Trilaxian commander thought he knew about intelligent life. The viewing screen showed cities where different species from across the galaxy lived and worked together in harmony, research facilities where human scientists collaborated with alien refugees who had escaped Trilaxian conquest schools where human children learned alongside young beings from dozens of different worlds. "This is impossible," Yuki whispered, as he watched human doctors treating injured creatures whose biology was completely different from Earth life. "How can your medical systems work on alien physiology?" "We study and we adapt." Suman explained, "Every refugee who comes to Earth teaches us something new about biology, chemistry, physics, or mathematics. We learn from them, and in return, we share what we know. The knowledge grows stronger with each exchange, but surely you must have conflicts," Yuki protested. "Different species have different needs, different values, different ways of thinking. How do you prevent wars?" "We listen," Kyung-soo said, simply. "When conflicts arise, we bring everyone together and we listen to all perspectives. We find solutions that work for everyone, instead of imposing the will of the strongest," Ji-won added. "We learned long ago that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker. When humans work together with other species, we accomplish things that none of us could achieve alone." The screen now showed human spacecraft that incorporated design elements from dozens of different civilizations, ships that could travel faster than anything in the Trilaxian fleet while using a fraction of the energy cities, that floated in gas giant atmospheres supported by technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics, weapons that could disable entire fleets without harming a single living being. "Your technology is not just advanced," Yuki realized with growing amazement. "It is completely revolutionary. You have somehow moved beyond the normal limitations that restrict all other species. We moved beyond those limitations by recognizing that they were never real limitations at all," Do-hyun explained. "They were just assumptions that everyone accepted without question. When you bring together minds that think in fundamentally different ways, those assumptions get challenged and better solutions emerge." "But how do you maintain order?" Yuki asked. "How do you prevent chaos? When so many different species live together, we do not prevent chaos." Suamin replied with what sounded like gentle laughter. "We embrace it. Chaos is just another word for creative potential. When different ideas collide, new possibilities are born. Order comes from cooperation, not control," Kyung-soo added. When everyone benefits from working together, they choose to maintain the system voluntarily. Force creates resistance, Ji-won continued. But partnership creates loyalty. Yuki thought about his own empire built on fear and maintained through constant military pressure. Rebellions were common and growing more frequent as conquered species found ways to resist Trilaxian rule resources that should have been used for scientific advancement. Instead went to building more weapons and training more soldiers to suppress uprisings. What would happen to the Trilaxian military if we adopted your approach? Yuki asked. Your soldiers would become explorers and scientists, Do-hyun replied. Teachers, and students builders instead of destroyers. But we are warriors by nature. Yuki protested. It is who we are as a species. You are also curious by nature. Suman observed. We have seen this in your scientific achievements, your art, your music, your literature. Trilaxians are not just warriors, you are thinkers and creators as well. War is something you do. Kyung-soo added, it is not something you are. The difference matters, Ji-won concluded, because what you do can be changed. The viewing screen now showed images that took Yuki's breath away. Trilaxian refugees who had escaped the Empire and found homes on Earth, working alongside humans on projects that seemed impossible. Former Trilaxian soldiers who had laid down their weapons and picked up scientific instruments. Trilaxian children playing with human youngsters, learning languages and ideas that their parents had never imagined. These are my people, Yuki whispered. How did they come to be here? Some escaped from conquest worlds before your forces could capture them. Do-hyun explained, others were rescued from prison planets by human expeditionary teams. A few were soldiers like yourself who chose a different path when they saw what cooperation could accomplish. They look happy. Yuki observed they are happy. Sumin confirmed. They are free to be who they truly are, instead of who the Empire demands they become. They are contributing to something larger than themselves. Kyung-soo added, their knowledge and skills are valued instead of wasted on endless wars. They are building the future instead of destroying it. Ji-won said. Yuki watched his fellow Trilaxians laughing and working alongside humans and other species. He saw Trilaxian scientists making discoveries they never could have achieved, working alone. He saw Trilaxian artists creating beauty that incorporated influences from across the galaxy. He saw Trilaxian children learning to think in ways that would have been forbidden in the Empire. For the first time in his life, Yuki began to question whether conquest was really the best path for his people. The bridge of Yuki's flagship fell completely silent, except for the soft humming of computer systems that were no longer entirely under Trilaxian control. His crew members looked to their commander for orders, but what orders could he possibly give? Now his weapons would not fire without human permission. His engines responded only when the humans allowed movement. His most highly classified military information was apparently as accessible to these beings as children's stories. What do you want? From us? Yuki asked. Finally, his voice heavy with confusion and growing respect. Nothing. Do-hyun replied, and somehow Yuki believed this impossible answer completely. We do not want your technology, your territory, your resources, or your submission. We want something far more valuable than any of those things. What could possibly be more valuable than conquest? Yuki asked. Your perspective, Do-hyun said simply. Your knowledge, your wisdom, your friendship. Yuki felt his mandibles clicking together in bewilderment. I do not understand what you mean. Suman's voice rejoined the conversation, patient as a teacher working with a struggling student commander. How many different species has the Trilaxian Empire conquered during its expansion across the Galaxy 40? 7 Yuki answered automatically, and how many of those conquered species were allowed to contribute their unique knowledge, perspectives, and cultural wisdom to Trilaxian science and civilization, Yuki remained quiet for a long moment because the answer was embarrassing. The truth was that no conquered species had ever been permitted to contribute anything. Conquered peoples became slaves or were eliminated entirely. Their knowledge, their culture, their unique ways of understanding the universe died with them or was forgotten in Trilaxian prison camps. You systematically destroy potential. Kyung-soo observed without accusation, but with obvious sadness. Every species you conquer represents thousands of years of different evolutionary thinking, different approaches to mathematics, physics, biology, philosophy, art, music, literature. You eliminate all of that incredible diversity in favor of enforcing strict Trilaxian conformity across your empire. But what if Jiwon added, instead of choosing conquest your people, chose collaboration instead? The viewing screen changed once more, showing something that made Yuki's 4 hearts skip several beats. It was a star map, but not of any galactic region he recognized. The scale was absolutely enormous, showing not just their local spiral arm, but dozens of neighboring galaxies as well. The image contained more stars than Yuki had imagined could exist in the entire universe. There are approximately 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe, Do-hyun explained calmly. Each galaxy contains hundreds of billions of stars. Many of those stars have planetary systems. Some of those planets support life, and a few of those living worlds have developed intelligent civilizations. The Trilaxian Empire currently controls territory containing perhaps a few million star systems. The map zoomed outward even further, making their vast interstellar empire appear as a tiny speck of dust floating in an ocean of infinite possibility. You are fighting bloody wars over cosmic dust. Commander Yuki Do-hyun continued, killing unique civilizations for resources that are essentially infinite on the universal scale. Meanwhile, the real treasures, the accumulated knowledge and wisdom of different species, are being destroyed forever with each conquest. Yuki stared at the display, feeling smaller and more insignificant than he had ever felt in his entire life. What exactly are you proposing we do instead, partnership? Do-hyun said, as if the answer were obvious. Take word back to your Trilaxian Empire. Tell them you discovered something on Earth that is infinitely more valuable than conquest. Tell them you found teachers who are willing to share knowledge freely instead of slaves to be dominated and controlled. And, if the Empire leadership refuses this offer, Yuki asked, if they send a much larger fleet with orders to destroy your world completely. The humans remained quiet for several moments before Do-hyun answered with the same calm certainty he had shown throughout their conversation. Then we will be ready for them as well. But we would much rather build something beautiful together than fight destructively apart. But you must understand, Yuki said, the fear clear in his voice. The Trilaxian Empire has never retreated from a conquest. The High Command will interpret any failure here as weakness. They will send everything they have to crush your world. We understand the risks, Su-min replied gently. But Commander, consider this possibility. What if instead of crushing us, they chose to join us? What if the Trilaxian Empire became the first galactic civilization to choose growth through cooperation instead of expansion through domination? What if your people became teachers instead of conquerors? Kyung-soo added, explorers instead of destroyers, partners instead of masters. What if the Trilaxian Empire led the galaxy toward a better future? Jiwon concluded. Instead of repeating the same old patterns of violence and destruction, Yuki felt something stirring in his chest that he had never experienced before. It was not the familiar excitement of conquest or the satisfaction of victory. It was something entirely new and strange. Hope, perhaps, or maybe it was the beginning of wisdom. Commander Yuki stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked down at the small blue planet below him. His 4 yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction as he studied the readings on his control screen. This was going to be another easy victory for the great Trilaxian Empire. The planet called Earth looked so peaceful and quiet from space, Yuki could see white clouds swirling over blue oceans and brown continents. His ship computers told him that billions of creatures called humans lived down there, but they seemed completely helpless. The humans had no force fields around their cities, no big laser guns protecting their skies. Their fastest spaceships could barely travel between the planets in their own solar system using old-fashioned rocket fuel that made Yuki laugh. For 300 years, the Trilaxian Empire had been conquering worlds across the galaxy. Yuki himself had led successful attacks on 47 different planets. Each time the story was the same. The local species would panic when they saw his great fleet of warships. They would beg for mercy or try to fight with their primitive weapons. Then Yuki would demonstrate the power of advanced Trilaxian technology, and the planet would surrender within hours. Earth would be no different, Yuki was sure of this. The intelligence reports from his scout ships painted a clear picture. The humans were a young species that had only recently learned to leave their home planet. They fought wars with metal bullets and chemical explosives. Their computers were slow and simple. Their medicine was crude and basic. In every way that mattered, the humans were thousands of years behind Trilaxian civilization. Yuki clicked his sharp mandibles together in amusement. This conquest would probably take less time than any previous mission. His 17 warships carried enough firepower to crack open a moon. Each ship held dozens of Trilaxian soldiers wearing power armor and carrying plasma weapons. The humans would take one look at this mighty fleet and immediately surrender. The bridge crew around Yuki worked quietly at their stations, preparing for the standard conquest protocol. First, they would scan the planet for military targets. Then they would send a surrender demand to the human governments. Finally, they would demonstrate their superior technology by destroying a few empty buildings. If the humans were smart, they would give up immediately. If they were foolish enough to resist, Yuki would be forced to destroy their major cities until they learned better. Lieutenant Hana turned from her communication station and spoke to Yuki. Her voice sounded confused and slightly worried. "Commander," she said, "I am receiving a transmission from the planet." Surface Yuki was not surprised. The humans had probably detected his fleet and were already preparing to surrender. "Good," he said. "Let me hear their pitiful plea for mercy." But when Hana activated the speakers, something impossible happened. Instead of panicked human voices begging in their crude language, a calm, clear voice spoke in perfect Trilaxian. The language flowed smoothly with all 17 harmonic frequencies perfectly balanced. The pronunciation was flawless, and the grammar was more precise than most native Trilaxian speakers could manage. "Welcome to Earth," the voice said, with what sounded almost like friendly greeting. "My name is Do-hyun, and I have been waiting for you." Commander Yuki, every person on the bridge froze in shock. The communication officers stared at their equipment in disbelief. The tactical crew stopped their work and turned to listen. Yuki felt his crystalline exoskeleton crack slightly from stress. The Trilaxian language was considered the most complex communication system in the galaxy. It required vocal cords that could produce 17 different sound frequencies at the same time. No other species had ever learned to speak it properly. "This is impossible," Yuki hissed, his mandibles chattering with anger. "Our sacred language cannot be spoken by inferior beings. Check your translation computers." The communication officers worked frantically at their stations, but after several minutes they reported that all equipment was functioning normally. The voice was definitely coming from a human, and he was definitely speaking pure Trilaxian without any mechanical assistance. The human voice continued speaking, and with each word, Yuki felt his confidence draining away like water from a broken container. "I know this must be confusing for you," Do-hyun said pleasantly. Your advanced scout ships have been observing our planet for 3 years. You thought your stealth technology made them invisible to us. Did you really believe we would not notice? Strange objects moving through our solar system. Yuki felt his 4 hearts begin beating faster. His people possessed the most advanced stealth technology in the galaxy. Their scout ships used quantum phase shifting to become completely undetectable. No species had ever spotted Trilaxian reconnaissance vessels before a conquest. Yet this human was claiming they had been watching the Watchers for 3 full years. I know you are Commander Yuki of the battlecruiser, Nemesis. Do-Yun continued his, voice remaining calm and almost friendly. I know you have 1,200 soldiers aboard, 17 ships. I know your weapon systems and your battle plans. I know you believe my species is primitive and defenseless. The human paused for a moment, and when he spoke again, there was something different in his tone, something that made Yuki shiver, despite the warm bridge temperature. I also know you are about to make the biggest mistake in Trilaxian military history. Yuki ordered his weapons. Officer to target the source of the transmission immediately, but Lieutenant Minho reported something that made Yuki's exoskeleton develop new stress fractures. The signal was not coming from any single location on the planet's surface. Instead, it seemed to be originating from everywhere at once, as if the entire solar system had become one giant communication device. You seem confused, Do-Yun said, and somehow his voice now appeared to be coming from inside the bridge itself, as if he were standing right next to Yuki. Let me show you something that might help explain our current situation. The main viewing screen flickered and changed, from showing the peaceful blue planet to displaying something that made Yuki gasp in terror. It was a perfect 3-dimensional map of his entire fleet, showing not just the position of every ship, but also detailed information about their internal layouts, crew numbers, weapon specifications, and even personal files of individual soldiers. This is fascinating technology, Do-Hyun said, as if he were a teacher explaining something interesting to students. Your ships use quantum crystalline processors for their main computers. Very elegant design, though I think the power distribution could be more efficient. The display zoomed in on one of the smaller escort vessels, highlighting it in red light. This is the TSS Retribution. Do-Yun continued. Commanded by Captain Hana, who leads 47 brave soldiers. Her ship carries plasma torpedoes, ion cannons, and a crew mostly consisting of young Trilaxians on their first conquest mission. Yuki watched in growing horror as the display showed information that should have been impossible for any outsider to access. The human even knew details about Captain Hana's personal life, including the fact that she was expecting her first offspring, though she had not yet informed anyone about her pregnancy. Now please watch carefully, Do-Yun said, and his voice carried a note of gentle instruction. Suddenly, the engines of the Retribution shut down completely. Then the weapon systems went offline, followed by the navigation computers and communication arrays. One by one, every electronic system aboard the escort ship deactivated, leaving it drifting helplessly in space. But the crew remained completely safe with life support continuing to function perfectly. I could have destroyed your ship in an instant, Do-Hyun explained patiently. Instead, I chose to demonstrate control rather than destruction. You see, Commander, your people are certainly warriors and very good ones, but we humans are something entirely different. We are problem solvers. Across the fleet, similar demonstrations began occurring on other ships. Navigation systems started displaying impossible routes through hyperspace that defied known physics. Communication arrays began broadcasting what sounded like human music instead of military orders. Weapon targeting computers stopped acquiring enemy targets and instead began creating beautiful artistic patterns in space. Through all of these impossible events, Do-Hyun's voice remained patient and almost kind, as if he were speaking to old friends rather than invading enemies. You came to our world expecting to find primitive creatures, cowering in fear before your superior technology. What you have discovered instead is that your superior technology now belongs to us.